Good morning. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy here on smartmoneyculture.tv. Today we're going to pivot back to an old story that, again, is continuing to be featured in the news. It's going to be a big issue for businesses moving forward, and that's ERC claims. So this is money the government just threw out there. They wanted people to take this money. This is supposed to help the economy. And lo and behold, every time they do this with the PPP, with the SBA loans, the EIDL loans, with now the ERC claims, every time they just throw money out there to deal with a catastrophe that many think the government created. Yeah, of course it's rife with fraud, but there's a lot of honest businesses being caught up in this as well. So we're gonna take a break and be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a lot of news to cover today, and we're just gonna dive right into it. A lot of economic news. The first one I'm gonna focus on is a Fox Business article. It's pretty straightforward, talking about Social Security increase. And actually, I don't even like the headline of it because it's a little misleading. So it said your Social Security COLA, cost of living expense increase, could be bigger than expected next year. So bigger than expected, that makes it sound like they're actually going to increase it. So as you get into it, it's bigger than expected because inflation is continuing to go up. So again, and when you look at the cost of living expenses compared to what actual inflation is in the marketplace, they don't even come close. So again, that's why I'm much more pessimistic than this article is. This article makes it sound like, oh, great, they're getting a bigger than expected cost of living expense. So for the year, and this is saying that it could be around 3% for the year, based on the March inflation data. But that's not the real inflation increases that we've been seeing. I mean, gas is much higher, just jumped again. So here's the paragraph kind of buried down a little bit. This is what I thought was very important. So if they get a 3% increase in their monthly checks, it would mark a steep decline from 23 when they saw an 8.7% bump. This 8.7% last year, in 2023, is probably much more accurate compared to real inflation. But again, real inflation was much higher than 8.7%. The real inflation it's gone down a little bit in 23, but there's no inflation is the increase every single year. So when you add it year to year, when they had insufficient increases in the previous years, again, the 3% is well below and what it actually should be. So again, saying that it's going up a little bit because of inflation, and that's good news, is not good news at all, because the government doesn't fully track inflation. They ignore a lot of it, and those costs again and again get passed on to your average consumer, especially onto the heads of the poor. So average, but it is higher than the 2.6% average increase over the last 2 decades, right? But we're right now having the highest interest rate and then the last 2 decades. So again, with interest rates still raging, and again, we had 3% in a quarter, and now they're going to give 3% for the whole year. Again, this is what drives me nuts, that it really hurts the poorest the most. So be aware of that. Be wise with your money. If you're not holding on to every penny and try to pay off debt and get away from paying interest, I highly recommend you do. Some of the worst inflationary rates are the cost of money, credit cards, loans, etc., which the government, they're not doing anything about it, or very little. And there's little they can do about it. So again, I think I already touched on this article about why groceries are still expensive. So again, this talks about inflationary pressures on households. The next article I want to talk about is all about student loans. Student loans have been in the news a lot lately. And this is another government plan to essentially throw out money. Again, and this is kind of goes with the theme of today, talking about the ERC program. The government, this is another plan where they threw out money. They gave money to all kinds of people, and now they're trying to, they're not trying to claw this back, but they're still giving out free money, canceling debt, doing nice things for certain people. And all it does is put us as a country further and further into debt. So President Biden came out with another student loan plan, and this is from the Washington Examiner. And the cost, $700 billion. So that's $700 billion we really don't have. We're already spending $1.5 trillion more than we actually get every single year. So my opinion is that this is more reckless financial, spending just to buy cheap votes now and sell our future generations down the river with more and more debt. And the more debt, the more behind the government is, the more taxes are going to go up. The more, again, the pain is going to be felt by future generations. So again, this is kind of an accounting of it. That it could cost upward of $750 billion and could go higher. And so I'm just going to click on this analysis. This comes from the Committee for Free, Responsible Federal Budget. So again, it comes from a partisan source, but at the same time, you should look at both sides of each issue. And there's a lot of strong feelings regarding wiping out student loans. It sounds great. It sounds wonderful that we're helping people. But the people that we're helping are those that actually made it and went through college, which usually you're helping the wealthier individuals more than your average blue-collar worker that didn't go to college, that worked, and now they're paying the cost of going to college for people that never went, or people that did go. So you're taking that college burden from people that chose to go to college, chose to take on those loans, and shifting it mostly to people that never went to college and didn't pay that burden. So again, it's ironic. This is a very regressive tax in many ways, in that you're shifting most of that burden to your working class that didn't go to college. So again, you're helping out people with more money and potentially more money at college graduates, and shifting the cost towards the people that with lower incomes on average. So again, it really flies in the face of a lot of liberal ideology even. So the Supreme Court struck down the first effort to do this. And the expectation is that these and this is being passed or by executive action through the Biden administration, has nothing to do with Congress. He has no congressional authority to do any of this. But a lot of people are going to get excited. A lot of people are going to get, expect for this to happen. and then they're going to treat the Supreme Court as the bad guys when they actually follow the law. So again, when you have rogue actions like this, one of the biggest consequences here is it creates uncertainty in the market. It makes it harder to plan. It makes it harder to prepare. Do I go to college? Do I focus on a high paying degree, or do I take basket weaving, which isn't going to really pay for my bills? Do I go for public service, knowing that I'm going to have student loans, and a lot of people. I mean, I worked through college. I graduated and I had the GI Bill from the military, so I graduated with almost no debt from my 4-year degree. Um, But again, those people that worked and paid for it, they're the ones that are going to end up paying for those that never paid for the student debt and student loans. Um, so they're adding more ways to not pay, eliminating debt for borrowers at a high risk of default and those who show financial hardship. Um, so over 10 years, this is where you get the biggest cost. It's supposed to cost between 100 and 600 billion dollars over a decade, and who gets to pay all of those costs? The taxpayers. The taxpayers and future generations. So again, you have ongoing lawsuits regarding this, people saying you don't have the authority to do this, and the Supreme Court was pretty clear the last time. And again, they told them, look, you can't do this without congressional authorization. You have no authority to do this. And again, when executive actions are issued, they should be basing it on authority given to them by Congress. The executive does not make laws, so that's why we have checks and balances. This is a big one. Going with this, there's an AP article, Associated Press, and a lot of this, we're in an election year. A lot of this is political, but I think this is good to know. This note. One of the important things that we want to know, and this article is pretty much a campaign ad for President Biden. Associated Press is not known for their impartiality, but I thought it's important to focus on what is the difference, what are they calling for in taxes, and what's the difference between what President Biden is proposing and the tax plan that President Trump is pushing. So it should control and dictate who you vote for. What are their plans? What are they saying they're going to do? Now, ironically, there's not a lot of difference between the two as far as tax plans. So this article gets waxes nostalgic, and we're running out of time here. I'm going to have to touch on this when we get back from our next break. But again, diving into the difference between different tax plans and what to expect in the next election is important. So again, I'll be touching on this and then moving on to our next main topic for the day. Welcome back, everybody. So we've got this article up from the Associated Press. And if you were reading through this sounds like the start of a book. Oh, he savored his trip down memory lane, lingered longer at his childhood home. Um, I'm sorry, I have a hard time reading this stuff when it's just so over the top, biased in favor of one person. Um, and so I'm gonna skip past most of this stuff that's just ridiculous, and we want to focus on what is the difference in tax plans. So, ironically enough, there's not a lot of information about what they want to do, and that's mainly because they're really good about hiding the ball. So, President Biden said that he wanted to make the tax code fairer, keeping more money in Americans' pockets. How's he going to do that? Increase taxes, a 25% minimum tax rate for billionaires. And he says that's how we invest in our country. Most of the investing has been done through the green energy programs, which, just like what Obama did with Solyndra and plenty of other debacles, I mean, we've spent millions and millions of dollars. There's one program to build chargers, and I think after millions have been spent, 3 chargers were built. It's something pathetic like that. So true investment in growth normally doesn't come from the government. They're wildly inefficient. The abuse and the fraud. Again, anytime you have the government throwing money out there, you're going to have huge fraud, waste, and abuse. And oftentimes, it's the very politicians passing these laws that have their fingers in the pie and are raking in tons of money directly from the government. So, anyway, where is it? I mean, the best information here is really buried. This is it. As President Trump signed into law 2016 a series of tax breaks. They're claiming it disproportionately benefited the rich. That's been debunked. It benefited people across the economic spectrum, which is why, until COVID, the economy was booming. The economy was doing very well. Now, here's the kicker. Many of the cuts expire at the end of 2025, and Biden wants to keep the majority of them. So, this is the truth of the matter. That Biden wants to keep most of Trump's tax breaks. He's not going to change it except for billionaires. So he wants to raise $4.9 trillion over 10 years with higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations. And here's the problem. Every time you do this, every time you target the rich, you know what the rich mostly do? They leave. They usually have houses overseas or whatever. A lot of them leave. This happens every time they do this. There have been articles, there's been plenty of proof showing and studies showing that when you target the rich, they leave. And you know what happens when they leave? A lot of their money goes with them. And so it hurts the economy. A lot of times it's called the Laffer curve. When you're actually, look it up, it's an economic idea that when you try to raise taxes too high, you actually get fewer taxes. It gets to the point of declining returns and actually reduce overall expenses. That's why when President Reagan started, the tax rate was up to, I believe, around 70% under Carter, because inflation was through the roof and the government couldn't pay its bills. And it caused the economy to stagnate with high inflation, which is a very rare thing. We're seeing that again today because we've put in a lot of the same policies as Jimmy Carter. So again, same plan as Trump, but he wants to tax the rich. And so that is the key information here. The rest of this, I'm sorry, it's a lot of fluff. Orange man bad, Biden good. And again, it reminds people plenty of times that, they have all these trials going on for Trump. That's a different issue. I'm not going to touch on that. um, for better or for worse. Now, Trump hasn't really put out a new tax plan. His main thing is make these permanent. And this is what they do a lot of times. They put it out there, they do a popular tax cut, and they set it out for so many years, knowing that someone else is going to have to make the hard decision to make them permanent or not. And here's the tricky secret is both parties want to make them permanent. Because neither party wants to be seen as raising taxes on average Americans. The problem is whenever they target the rich, and this is the problem with his claims, it says he wants to keep his vow that anybody earning less than $400,000 will pay. No one earning less than $400,000 will pay more in taxes. That's ridiculous. I'm paying more taxes. You're paying more taxes. Everybody's paying more in taxes. But they're talking about just straight percentage. There's all kinds of other tax rates that have gone up. And the worst part about this is inflation. As your money becomes worth less, that is one of the worst taxes out there. So I think the key point here is very, very much buried in the article, but that nobody wants to get rid of the 2017 tax breaks. The only difference is Biden wants to target the rich, which has been his mantra, but they've been going after for a long time. I think that's pretty interesting that despite all the rhetoric, sometimes the truth of the matter is they're not that very far apart. I'm going to share one last article, and this is going to be our main topic for the day, talking about COVID relief. And I've kind of prefaced it with some of these other articles again, this is the ERC. This comes from NBC News. And again, you read this headline. It says, bogus tax service specialists duped business owners in latest COVID relief debacle, IRS says. So I love how they have these headlines. Again, this NBC News at times sounds like they're just like the PR officials for the IRS. But this is a very important thing to talk about. Because regardless if they were duped or not, and there was absolutely some duping going on, it's hurt. It's going to hurt taxpayers. It's going to hurt individuals, honest taxpayers, more than anybody else. And the reason for that is because here's the government, again, throwing out all kinds of money. ERC, we're helping people, we're helping people, we're helping people. And then they say, oh, hold the phone. We approved all kinds of these applications, and now we're going to really tighten the rules. So again, the issue here with the ERC, and I've never really gotten into it. I didn't apply for it myself because personally, I don't trust the government. I didn't trust them to cancel the PPP loans. Many of those did get canceled. I wasn't sure I qualified. I looked into it a little bit. It was a little iffy. I said, nope, not going to touch it. I did take the SBA EIDL loan. That's pretty straightforward. Had a great rate. Again, there's no reason not to get some very cheap money like that. Inflation is higher than the interest rate I'm paying on that now. But as far as the ERC, again, this is another government. We're going to throw money at a problem. And the problem is every time they throw money, what does that do with all this easy money flowing into the economy? It raises inflation. It adds to the money supply, so you have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods, and the cost of everything goes up. And demand has stayed high, and the main reason is because we have more people in the country than ever before, mainly due to immigration. And that's a separate issue. But again, when you have more people, more demand chasing the same or similar amount of goods, and there's more money flowing around, it is natural. It is the most obvious thing in the world that you're going to have high inflation. And the government loves to do quick things to show that they're helping problem. But like Ronald Reagan famously said, the worst, scariest thing you can hear is, "I'm here to help and I'm from the government." So the pain being felt here is very real. When they had some deadlines to voluntarily withdraw, I talked about the ERC a lot. And I think this overview of ERC claims is very important, because now the IRS is going after people, and in a big way. Here's the crazy part. We were talking, and I mentioned an article about the cottage industry of people now blowing up people's phones. If you put any inquiry about getting on the exchanges or do I qualify, you're going to get blown up, because now there's a cottage of industry signing people up for these exchanges. All kinds of private companies, and they make money every time they enroll someone. Now, if someone is enrolled and it's not correct and they get more subsidies than they're supposed to, and that's determined after they got the subsidies, who gets stuck with the bill? Absolutely not these promoters. It's the individual that got set up for these exchanges and these, the government insurance. My wife, finally, she's been reporting them and threatening them every time they call, and it's been driving her nuts. She said, "I only got 2 calls yesterday." She was averaging 10 to 15 calls a day. When, again, we make too much money, we don't qualify for a decent plan. And it's just and we have health insurance alternatives right now that we're using. Same thing is happening here. Cottage industry popped up because the IRS was just throwing money out. And they're like, we will go through this and make sure, see if you qualify. If we think we qualify, we'll file these claims for you. And who's going to be responsible? Not the tax service specialists. They're not going to be responsible. It is the business owners that the IRS is going after. Now, there are some tax service specialists who clearly engaged in fraud, and the IRS is going after those as they can find them. But the biggest ones, some of the biggest ones haven't been touched. So again, they have to show that they were being fraudulent. And so we're going to dive into this article. There's a lot of information here. And if you were considering of applying for the ERC, I believe the deadline's passed now. Oh no, it's not passed. They still have a moratorium on processing them. I think they're going to make massive changes before they process anymore. And they're going to clean up this back. So all this free money that got sent out is going to come right back. So they talk about a business owner, Scott Vollner. Again, everybody got hurt through COVID. But the way they're interpreting the law, and I say interpreting because it was very unclear, it has made it very narrow as to who qualifies. Now, these tax service specialists, as they put in quotes to kind of lump them all together, the law was drafted in a ridiculous manner. It said that it limited how much CPAs could charge for this service. So the CPAs that have the fiduciary responsibility, that have the knowledge as to who should qualify, they had very little incentive to do this because it was a lot of work for very little pay. So they weren't going to advertise. They weren't going to put the word out. They might recommend it to some of their clients, but they're not going to really promote this. So this is where you got the promoters or tax service specialists that promoted this, but they weren't the actual preparers, because if they were the ones that prepared them, they were limited on how much they could charge. Most of these promoters, they charge a percent fee, and a 10% fee is actually pretty low. I've seen 20, 30%. I think between 20 and 30% was standard. And they do the whole package. They fill out the forms, but who's filling out the forms? Actual CPAs. So these promoters have to use a CPA or someone, so they make it easy for the CPAs. They bring the business to them. They pay them money to do this. They pay them the fee to prepare these, but they don't have, the CPAs didn't have to promote for it. They don't have to advertise for it. So they were just churning out paperwork, but you had a CPA looking over this in most cases. Now the IRS is saying you don't qualify, and they're coming back on this. Problem is the money's already spent. He got the money, he spent it, which is why they had this the voluntary plan where you could say, look, I'll keep 20%, which really would just cover the fee to the promoters. In this case, it was only 10%, so I probably had a pretty good company doing this for him. And so he hasn't even called the company that he referred to. And later on, they do say that, look, most of these companies, as part of their agreement, they said, look, you'll get a full refund of our fees if the IRS determines you're not eligible. The problem is that they got, when businesses get these monies, they're not thinking I have to hold on to this money for a year or two until the IRS changes positions and then makes a decision on how they should do this correctly. And that's where it puts people in a bind. This is where it puts businesses in a bind. And this is where it's going to hurt businesses across the country. On a lot of businesses. So they said there was a tsunami of bad claims here. Yes, there are a lot of people just filing fraudulently for this. Now, these are people, businesses that never qualified, committed outright fraud, people that lied on their applications. And so some examples: a convicted murderer in California in prison orchestrated a scheme to steal more than $1 million, some of which he used to throw a party at a $9,000 a night Las Vegas penthouse, and then fly his relatives home on a private jet. I don't know how someone in a California prison is going to this crazy party. Maybe he got out. Who knows? But there was very little oversight. So you did have lots of fraud, tens of thousands of claims from businesses that never existed or didn't have employees. Now, I did have someone call me, and it wasn't for ERC, but it was someone for an EIDL loan. And they committed fraud on the government. They never had a business and made up the information to get cheap money from the IRS. And the IRS signed off and sent them the money. Now, then they were struggling financially. He's like, okay, I'm having trouble paying back this loan. What should I do? And he called me up. My best advice to him was, pay it. Pay every penny. Because if not, you have the government looking into you and seeing, okay, what really happened here? And that's the last thing he wanted. So I told them to pay it all back, pay the government back, and then you should be okay. But the trick is, there's so much fraud here that the IRS doesn't have enough resources. And the next thing, they can't even reach 1% of the fraudsters. The people actually out there committing fraud. The problem is that the actual fraudsters, they know how to disappear. So, again, this last paragraph, it joins a list of pandemic relief programs that have been plundered by fraudsters with losses reaching as much as $280 billion, or enough to fund the IRS budget for 25 years. So we look at our budget, we look at how much the government is spending, and we're on a hard break. So I'm going to be continuing the conversation when we get right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Taxes Made Easy. Thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast. Really kind of tearing into and breaking down this article from NBC News. And unfortunately, like many articles today, the best news, the best information is buried deep in the article. So I kind of went over a little bit and just want to highlight some of the stuff. This I think is one of the best points right here. Like in the ERC, been plundered by fraudsters, losses. It's just like all the other pandemic relief programs, where the government just throws money at a problem they created, and again, to do the shutdowns, they might have been necessary for a little bit, but for as long as we did, as hard as we did, shutting down the schools like we did, I think that the jury's out on this. That even liberals are saying it was too much, and shutting down our economy the way that government did was ridiculous. And President Trump was president at the time, and I fault him for going along with the experts. Fauci should be in jail, in my opinion. It hurt the economy. It hurt people bad, and then they try to fix their mistake by throwing billions of dollars at the program. And so Werfel, who's the current IRS commissioner, was just got appointed. He said, it's not my fault. I wasn't there when Congress designed the program, and Congress is horrible. They no, they're like a bunch of teenagers in a candy store. Let's spend money. They have a desire to get the money out quickly, leading to decreased scrutiny of claims. Let's fix it later. It's not our money. We'll just throw money at the problem. So I'm going to skip down a little bit. Here's a point. The largest promoters who blanketed TikTok with ads haven't faced charges. They probably won't. And then they even had some celebrities come on. But this is what everybody understood. Very few people were speaking out against it. And so we're skipping down here. Larry Gary, so they cite the CPA, and again, many CPAs were saying the same thing. Is one of the few voices from 2020 saying, hey, this is going to be a problem. And who does he bear the mess on? Congress and the IRS. You should have had more guidance out. You should have been clearer with who qualified and who didn't. And the problem is, their interpretation now is that you had to have been directly impacted by a shutdown. So they've tightened up their definition. They've tightened up who qualifies, and what they're doing is they're disqualifying a lot of businesses from red states. Why? Because red states didn't have the same shutdowns for as long and as bad as blue states. So this is turning into a little bit of a partisan thing here, where half the country is being denied, and businesses that thought they qualified, it wasn't clear. And he says anyone could easily defraud the program. You could put in a fraudulent federal ID number, fraudulent employee, send it in, you get the money. And the fraudsters are great at disappearing, because this is what they do. They get so much money from the government by defrauding it, that every time the government does it, it's like, okay, another payday. And then they talk about the third-party promoters. The third-party promoters, those that were legitimate businesses, their whole reason was to do this. But these companies came into being due to how Congress shaped the law, which is, I think, really ridiculous. There's this credit, that's very lucrative credit out there for people. But right now, earlier in the article, it talks about one of these companies doing 2 rounds of layoffs. Well, yeah, can't make any money right now, because the IRS isn't processing new claims. People are holding off because the IRS is coming out throwing all these warning things that now we're going to audit people. We're going to pursue people not only for the money, but possible fraud and criminal actions. So people are backing off. Nobody wants to follow these. And so they're taking this cottage industry and putting it out of business. Now, those that are legitimate businesses will do their best to refund people that are found to have not qualified, which was in pretty much all the contracts in that I've heard of and seen. But the cottage industry pops up, serves a particular need, and when that need disappears, that industry goes away. That's why they can't pursue the promoters. They're going after, unless the promoters are promoting outright fraud, they can be prosecuted, but the true fraudsters are the ones that are the best at disappearing. So that's why business owners are going to get hit with the biggest hit with the biggest debts here. So again, they talk about some of the biggest, heaviest advertised, posted online of millions, haven't been touched. They're not responding, and again, it kind of goes back between gray and some of those other things. Here's something that I wanted to highlight here. The person they highlight and they talk about in the beginning, this poor guy that got defrauded. This company that he used, they only charged 10%. So that's very low for the industry and what happened. He, at the very end of the whole article, it says that he didn't qualify, but he didn't reach out to them for a refund. That's $33,000 of refund that is in their contract that he's entitled to. Why wouldn't he reach out for $33,000? That sounds ridiculous. I've known promoters. I've known people that were known in their industry. They had contacts with CPAs because they have contacts. They're known. Many of them are trusted, and they were just taking advantage of the situation that the IRS created. Now, again, plenty of fraudsters out there as well, but I think for the most part, people that were promoting ERC were trying to run a legitimate business based on a situation the IRS and the government created. Why? So this is one of my big messages out there. If you are being told by the IRS that you have to pay the money back, that you didn't qualify, and you appealed it, they denied the appeal, ask for a refund. Absolutely ask for a refund. That would be the first thing I would tell Mr. Volner. Ask for a refund. Go to ERC specialists. Don't say, "Oh, I don't think they'll give it to me." That's ridiculous. You'll always be told no if you never ask. Well, you'll never be told yes if you never ask. So you absolutely should go ask for that refund. And now we're going to pivot into, if you do fall into this situation, how should you address these huge huge balances being charged to businesses because of the ERC? So first of all, ask for a refund. It's in almost all of these contracts. If not, you were dealing with a less scrupulous company. But from what I've seen, and I've reviewed some of these contracts, this right to a refund is in almost every single one. It was one of their selling points, that if you have to pay the money back, you get a full refund from us. If they honor that, those aren't scammers. Scammers don't give money back. They don't give and offer full refunds. The problem here is because the government has completely shut things off. They opened the spigots wide open, created the cottage industry, and now they've completely reversed course where they have a moratorium. They can't file anything. All these companies that probably are, many of them are run by legitimate business people, and they're probably trying to refund the money. But when the IRS shuts off the spigot, doesn't let them continue to operate, and forces them to shut down, the IRS and their decisions are half the problem here. There are probably legitimate companies that still qualify for it and that are scared out of their mind right now because there was poor guidance, there's poor information, and just because you have one CPA screaming to the wind and say, "Hey, look, I was right. I didn't trust the system. I didn't think it was done right." That's one opinion out of how many? And the IRS is actually giving out this money to people. I think it's very unfair that the IRS gives money out. People legitimately thought that they qualified, and now the IRS turns around and said, oopsie, give me all the money back. I think that's very unfair of our government. And again, this is not going to help our current state of the economy. It's not going to help businesses. It's going to hurt a lot of them. So, business owner, I'm going to talk as if I was talking to Mr. Volman. First of all, ask for a refund. You know, again, you want to be the first in line to ask for a refund. If the IRS tells you you don't qualify, go and get that refund while they can still give you a refund. So, I'm going to close this other window. Second of all, I'm going to go and stop sharing. And there's more information in this article, but I try to hit the main points here. One of the things it says that he's pleading the government for a payment plan. You're entitled to a payment plan. If you don't know how to set up a payment plan with the IRS, given your situation, get some professional help. But almost anybody can set up a payment plan. The only times the IRS denies a payment plan is when you've got enough cash or assets that you can easily liquidate without affecting your business, where you can just pay the whole thing off. That's not most people. 95 times out of 100, I would say, or even higher, the IRS will just give you a payment plan because you said, okay, this is the situation I found myself in. Let's negotiate something here. Like I said, the only times I see pushback is when you have the assets to pay the balance, to easily pay the balance down or pay it off. And again, that will avoid ongoing penalties and interest. But this is going to be attached to your EIN, your business. So I don't think anybody was signing on to this personally as a personal guarantee. This is all done on EINs and through a business. So what happens? So first of all, ask for a refund. Number two, go to the IRS, either yourself or use a tax professional, and ask for an installment agreement. The IRS says no. First of all, you're probably not talking to the right people in the IRS. But 9 times out of 10, you go to the business line, and they will usually set up a payment plan for you. It will give you time to make these payments and pay it off, usually up to 7 years. Now, through that process, ask for penalty abatements. That's suggestion number 3. And this is going in and treating this just like any other debt. The IRS hasn't made any special rules. This is just another tax break. You applied for it. It was denied after you got the money, so now you owe the money. But these taxes are under your EIN. What if you can't afford to pay the full amount on an installment agreement? You just don't have the money. Your company is not bringing enough revenues to pay this. So we're going to stick with the Scott Volner example. So if we go $330,000 in 7 years or 6 years, that's about $4,500 a month, at least, that he would have to pay on an installment agreement. It's very possible if you can show that you can't afford it, the IRS will put you on a partial pay installment agreement. So let's say he can only afford $1,500. With business debt like this, if you show that's all you can afford, they'll usually take it. So not only do you have the normal installment agreement, you have the partial pay installment agreements where if you can't pay the full amount off, you can usually negotiate something. It will be reviewed in a couple of years. They'll say, okay, has your income gone up? Can you afford to pay more? So that is something another option if you can't pay the full amount. What if it's too much and you just can't handle it? If it's too expensive, you can't afford any kind of payment plan and to continue operating your business, or if your business is losing money or things go down, inflation, this is a very tough time for businesses. If you close your business, Debts that are only associated with the EIN of your business go away when you close out your business. So again, if you and there are very few IRS tax debts that will follow someone personally. The main one is payroll taxes. So if you're going to close out your business, make sure your payroll taxes are paid. And again, we're running out of time, but there are options if you end up owing these. So contact a tax professional. You can always call us at 520-485-7371. You can email us at info@guardiantaxlaw.com or go to our website at guardiantaxlaw.com. Get some answers. This is going to be a huge thing that's going to affect many, many businesses. Get some help. Find a good tax professional that will walk you through the process and give you peace of mind that this can, and again, these are the kinds of cases that are handled every single day with the IRS, and the IRS is going to be expecting this flood of people needing assistance and needing resolutions. So don't freak out, don't stress out. Get some good advice and get some good help to help you through this time. So best of luck to you. I'm cheering for these businesses going through this difficult time. And take care of yourselves and call us if you have any questions.